The quiet beach town of Beaufort, South Carolina, woke up to the soft sound of a normal spring morning in 2023. At 53 years old, Robert Odell Waters owned Waters Plumbing of the Low Country. He sat at his kitchen table carefully looking through a pile of bills. This was a habit he learned over many years as a well-respected small business owner. Then at 6 a.m. a sharp knock broke the quiet. Mr. Waters, a South Carolina State Police detective, said in a strong but calm voice, "We have a warrant to arrest you for the 1988 murder of Cathy Sue Swartz in Three Rivers, Michigan." Waters' hand, rough from years of working with pipes and tools, stopped above his notebook. He slowly looked up, his eyes hard to read for a moment. Then a look of shock and real confusion appeared on his face. "What, Three Rivers? Cathy Swartz? I don't understand," he said in a shaky voice. The words sounded empty, as if he didn't understand what he was being blamed for. Many years earlier, on December 2nd, 1988, in the simple city of Three Rivers, Michigan, 19-year-old Cathy Sue Swartz had been happily getting ready for her baby daughter Courtney's first Christmas. Her small apartment glowed with hope from a decorated tree and was filled with brightly wrapped Muppets. She held the dreams of a young mother who was working hard to build a future. But that morning, a horrible, angry attack ended those dreams, leaving behind a crime scene full of terrible horror. A mother was killed. Yet in the middle of all the terrible things, one detail stood out with strange, scary calmness. The 9-month-old baby Courtney lay quietly in her crib. Her diaper was surprisingly clean, only a little bit wet. Police right away thought that the killer, after doing such a terrible thing, had actually changed the dirty diaper before leaving. The intruder also seemed to change the apartment's feeling in other scary ways. When officers arrived, the living room radio was playing an easy listening station. This was very different from the modern music Cathy usually liked. Running water in the bathtub suggested the killer might have taken a shower and changed clothes before running away, trying to wash away any sign of their terrible act. The quiet community of Three Rivers was thrown into shock and fear, forever hurt by the cruelty. For 35 years, her killer melted back into society, building a fake life of being respectable as a licensed plumber. His terrible secret stayed buried under many years of normal life. Meanwhile, Cathy's murder left a mark that would never go away on her family and the town. Doors with double locks, whispered warnings among neighbors, and a staying fear of the unknown became part of everyday life. Her family lived through a painful lifetime of questions with no answers. The town struggled with the ghost of an unsolved murder that shaped a whole generation. How did this man avoid justice for over 3 decades? What hidden evidence finally led investigators to his door? And most scary of all, how many lives crossed paths without knowing with a monster who walked freely among them? Where are you watching from today? I'm always interested to see how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. Today we're looking back at a scary case from December 1988, a story that broke a quiet Michigan community and stayed unsolved for 35 years. We'll uncover how one young mother's terrible death, a baby left untouched in her crib, and many years of hard work led investigators to a shocking arrest no one saw coming. This is a story of innocence, horror, silence, and a justice that refused to fade away with time. Three Rivers, a small city located in southern Michigan, was a place where life moved at a comfortable speed. In 1988, with a population just over 7,000 people, it was the kind of community where local news was often personal news, and a quiet Friday night was normal. It was into this simple place that 19-year-old Cathy Sue Swartz brought the hopeful beginnings of her young family. Cathy's roots went back to the even smaller, perfect village of Mendon, Michigan. There her parents, David Michael Swartz Sr. and Audrey Sue Augie Swartz, owned and ran a small 2-acre farm. It was a mix of fields mostly used for hay or, in some seasons, corn, stretching to meet the winding banks of the St. Joseph River. It was a childhood filled with the rhythms of country life, where community bonds were strong and the smell of freshly turned dirt was a familiar comfort. Cathy loved this upbringing. She joined Girl Scouts, sold cookies door to door, and took part in 4-H, where she learned the practical skills of farm life. Her greatest joy, a symbol of youthful freedom, arrived at age 8. Her very own horse, a gentle brown mare she lovingly called Ginger. Life began to change for the Swartz family during Cathy's senior year of high school, when they moved from Mendon to the nearby city of Three Rivers. The move came after her father accepted a job managing the pro shop at a busy local bowling alley. Cathy transferred to 3 Rivers High, adjusting to a larger, less familiar place. But before she could finish the year, she found out she was pregnant. A life-changing discovery that led her to leave school and get ready for motherhood. In March of 1988, Cathy gave birth to her daughter Courtney. Despite what society expected during that time, she accepted her role as a single mother with quiet strength and endless love for her baby. To help pay the bills, she took a short-term job at a local Burger King, flipping burgers and serving fries. It was a temporary step toward what she hoped would become a more stable future. After Courtney's birth, Cathy settled into an apartment in 3 Rivers, creating a small but warm home for herself and her baby daughter. Every late-night feeding, every gentle rocking, every whispered lullaby was proof of Cathy's new purpose. She saw not just a baby, but a universe of possibilities in Courtney's tiny face. She dreamed of playdates, first steps, and quiet evenings reading stories together, a future she was strongly building piece by piece for her daughter. It was in September 1988, when Courtney was about 6 months old, that Cathy met Michael Warner. Their connection was immediate, a bright spot of hope in a challenging time. By November, they were engaged. Though not Courtney's biological father, Michael naturally stepped into the role. Together, the 3 of them formed a small, hopeful family full of plans for the future. As early December 1988 came closer, the little apartment hummed with quiet joy and excitement. The young family was getting ready for Courtney's very first Christmas. A festive tree, carefully chosen and lovingly decorated, stood proudly in their living room. Its branches held a scattering of brightly wrapped gifts. Cathy had insisted on the brightest star at the top, and Michael had playfully lifted her to reach it. Their hands brushed, laughter filling the small apartment. She'd spent hours carefully wrapping several soft plush Muppets, imagining Courtney's tiny fingers holding Miss Piggy. A warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the glowing lights. This wasn't just a tree. It was their first shared dream, sparkling with the promise of a family Christmas. The night of December 1st, 1988 went like any other for Cathy and Michael. They spent the evening at home, sharing a simple meal of fish and chips, a normal routine in the glow of the Christmas tree. Later, they settled in for a round of board games. Their laughter perhaps echoed softly through the small apartment. They went to bed around midnight, expecting another ordinary day. About half an hour later, a knock at their door signaled some friends arriving. Likely unexpected visitors from a casual 3 Rivers evening. Michael, already settled and sleepy, opened the bedroom window to tell them they were in for the night. A brief, unimportant exchange that would later become a timestamp in a tragic sequence. The next morning, December 2nd, Michael woke up early for his shift at the local paper plant. He shared a usual kiss with Cathy, who was still in the nightshirt she'd worn to bed, and then stepped out into the crisp early morning Michigan air at exactly 5:25 a.m. The town was still waking up. A faint mist rose from the St. Joseph River, completely unaware of the horror about to happen within the walls of their simple apartment. Michael returned home that afternoon, the boring hum of his workday still in his ears. A faint smell of paper pulp stuck to his clothes. The digital clock on the kitchen counter read 3:30 p.m. as he put his key into the lock and turned it. The familiar click, a sound of coming home, but the normalcy quickly faded. In the front hallway, he noticed a few dark, scary drops on the pale floor. The faint metallic smell in the air, at first ignored as unimportant, got sharper with each step, filling his lungs. The quiet hum of the apartment, usually so comforting, now felt like a choking vacuum. His eyes, refusing to fully understand, moved from the dark drops on the floor to the smeared red on the staircase wall. Each streak was a brushstroke of horror, painting a path upward. A cold fear, sharp and sickening, began to twist in his stomach. A taste of throw-up rose in his throat. He forced himself to the second floor, his heart pounding against his ribs. He checked Courtney's room first, letting out a shaky breath of relief as he saw his 9-month-old daughter unharmed, peacefully asleep in her crib. A tiny, innocent island in a sea of growing terror. Then he turned to the bedroom he shared with Cathy. What he saw inside shattered his world. The room was not just splattered but soaked in blood, a scene of unimaginable violence. The nightshirt she had been wearing just hours earlier, when he had kissed her goodbye, was now almost torn off. A clear sign of a fierce struggle. It was horribly clear. The 19-year-old mother, his beloved fiancé, was dead. Panic grabbed him. Michael ran from the apartment, his mind spinning, his body pushed by a basic need for help. He burst into a neighbor's home. His confused cries quickly told the terrible news. A frantic call was made to the police. Then, driven by the protective instinct of a father, Michael raced back into the blood-soaked townhouse, gathering the unaware Courtney from her crib, protecting her from the nightmare that had taken her mother. The clock had not yet ticked past 3:45 p.m. when the first patrol car, siren wailing, screeched to a stop outside. Its flashing lights painted the quiet street in an urgent, sickening red. Almost immediately, headlights cut through the gathering twilight as David Sr. and Audrey arrived. Their car skidded slightly on the icy road. Panic was written all over their faces as they rushed toward the apartment. Without thinking, David Sr. tried to push past the officers standing in the doorway. "You cannot enter," Officer Mike Money said firmly, holding them back, his hand pressed against David Sr.'s chest. "The scene is secured." David Sr.'s fists clenched. "Cathy's in there. I have to see my daughter." His voice was raw, choked with disbelief and anger. His legs shook as he struggled against the officer's grip. Audrey's gaze landed on a young female officer carrying Courtney wrapped in a blanket. Time seemed to slow. Without hesitation, she darted forward, sweeping her granddaughter into her arms, holding the tiny body as if she could protect her from every ounce of horror that had happened. "Oh my God, my baby, my little baby," Audrey whispered, voice breaking, rocking Courtney gently. Her tears fell freely, soaking into the soft blanket. Her fingers trembled around the infant's tiny frame. Every heartbeat seemed painfully loud in the cold December air. Michael, still holding on to the edges of his sanity, was guided aside by two officers for questioning. He tried to speak, to explain, to hold on to something familiar. But the words caught in his throat. His arms felt empty, the warmth of Courtney now distant, and a cold fear settled deeper in his chest as he watched Audrey cradle the child. The sounds of police radios, distant sirens, and the shuffle of boots on icy pavement formed a sad chorus around them. Michael's mind raced. Images of Cathy's lifeless body flashed behind his eyelids. Outside, the Swartz family faced the unimaginable, the living nightmare that had taken their daughter and fiancé. Minutes stretched on, heavy and never-ending, before the officers finally began their careful work, allowing the scene to slowly move into the hands of the investigators. But for Michael and Cathy's parents, the world had already changed forever. A quiet Michigan street now forever marked by tragedy. The Three Rivers Police Department's dispatch log for December 2, 1988 would forever mark 3:47 p.m. as the official beginning of what would become the most confusing and lasting murder investigation in the city's history. Officer Mike Money, then a young patrolman, was among the first to arrive. Stepping into the Swartz apartment, the scene that unfolded before him was one of clear, terrible horror. His gaze swept the blood-splattered bedroom. A cold fear settled deep in his gut. This wasn't just a crime, he muttered to his sergeant, his voice tight. This was a violation. The pure rage, it's real. Cathy's murder had been mean and long-lasting, a sign of raw, uncontrolled anger. The medical examiner, Dr. Eleanor Vance, would later figure out that Cathy had been horribly beaten for about 15 minutes, based on the telltale color and depth of the heavy bruising across her body. She had also been strangled, but ultimately it was the catastrophic blood loss that took her life. 3 deep cuts on her neck, one of which cut through both her carotid artery and jugular vein, showed a deliberate and fatal intent. The murder weapon was never found at the scene, but investigators had a strong suspicion. A pair of household scissors? The chilling outline of scissor handles was clearly visible in blood on Cathy's sweatpants. A scary imprint of the final desperate struggle. Yet despite the wild cruelty, the crime scene was filled with bizarre and unsettling details that immediately confused investigators. It was believed that Cathy's body had been deliberately positioned so that she could see her daughter in the room across the hall. A cruel scene designed to maximize terror or despair. Dr. Vance's early examination placed the time of death sometime shortly after 12 noon, meaning Cathy had likely been dead for about 3 hours by the time Michael found her. Even more confusing was the state of Courtney. Michael had found his daughter unharmed in her crib, her diaper surprisingly clean, only slightly wet. Police immediately suspected that the killer had, with chilling calmness, changed the baby's soiled diaper before leaving. The killer also seemed to have changed the apartment's atmosphere in other strange ways. When officers arrived, the radio in the living room was tuned to an easy listening station, a clear contrast to the more modern music Cathy was known to like. The running water in the bathtub further suggested the killer might have showered and changed clothes before making their escape, trying to wash away the evidence of their terrible act. A single bloody footprint, matching a men's size 9 shoe, was found on the bathroom floor, a tempting but isolated clue. The phone line in the bedroom had been cut, cutting off Cathy's potential lifeline, and on the pink bedroom phone a faint hidden fingerprint was lifted. An early piece of crucial evidence. Then there were the written messages. Three Rivers police had recently gotten a new piece of forensic equipment, a handheld wand equipped with an alternate light source, special powder and specialized goggles designed to reveal tiny evidence like hairs and fibers, or substances cleaned off a surface. Using this new technology, police technician Marla Keaton made a startling discovery. On the refrigerator previously wiped clean, the words Metallica and Harley Was Here glowed ominously under the alternate light source. And in a more gruesome discovery, on Cathy's inner thigh, another chilling message, I was here, became visible. The lack of any forced entry immediately led police to one main suspicion. Cathy knew her killer. Michael Warner's confirmation that the front door was locked when he returned home made this stronger. Adding to this theory, a neighbor, a kindly woman named Mrs. Peterson who lived just down the hall, later told Officer Money that she had returned home that afternoon to find fresh pry marks on her own front door. As if someone had tried to break in, investigators thought this was a planned trick by the killer to make Cathy's murder look like a home robbery gone horribly wrong. Yet nothing in Cathy's apartment had been stolen or even disturbed in a way that matched a robbery. It didn't appear the killer went there for theft. Instead, the horrible nature of the attack, combined with the intimate, unsettling details, led detectives to believe the killer had entered Cathy's home with the intention of either consensual sex or, more likely, sexual assault, which had then grown into a rage-filled murder. This is going to haunt us, Officer Money confessed to his superior, Sergeant Miller, later that evening. Every detail from the position of the victim to the cleaned diaper, screams of a person who was both completely unhinged and frighteningly careful. We knew almost immediately that this wasn't going to be an easy case to crack. The first days and weeks of the investigation became a blur of intense activity for the Three Rivers Police Department. Patrolman Mike Money, quickly promoted to Detective Money because of his sharp observations at the crime scene, was a central figure. Under the leadership of Chief Henderson, detectives established a careful timeline of Cathy's final known hours. Piecing together Michael Warner's account, Dr. Vance's medical examiner report, and limited witness statements, local radio stations interrupted their usual programming with special bulletins. The Three Rivers community, usually so calm, found itself gripped by a chilling fear. Parents pulled their children closer, and unlocked doors became a thing of the past. Like with most investigations of this kind, the police's first critical focus fell upon the victim's romantic partner, Michael Warner. Detectives brought him in for long questioning, looking into every detail of his relationship with Cathy and his movements on December 2nd. Michael, still reeling from the shock, cooperated fully. His employer and several co-workers at the paper plant, an hour's drive from Three Rivers, confirmed his solid alibi. He had been at work for his entire shift with no chance to commit the crime. Furthermore, Michael's fingerprints and shoe size did not match the hidden print on the pink phone or the bloody size 9 footprint found in the bathroom. Most importantly, by all accounts from friends and family, Michael and Cathy had a solid, loving relationship filled with plans for their future together. The detectives reluctantly but definitely eliminated Michael Warner as a suspect. He was heartbroken, Detective Money noted in his case files. Not angry, not defensive. Just utterly, completely broken. The investigation then shifted to a second important figure, Michael Howard, the man Cathy claimed was Courtney's biological father. Howard, who had previously expressed doubts about his paternity, was brought in for questioning. After the murder, a court-ordered paternity test clearly confirmed what Cathy had known. He was, in fact, Courtney's father. Despite this connection, investigators quickly ruled him out as the killer. His fingerprints did not match those found at the crime scene, and he provided a confirmed alibi. He had been at work that day and later spent the afternoon with his girlfriend, who confirmed his account. A third suspect emerged, one who seemed at first to be the most promising lead. He was 19-year-old Troy Schultes, Michael Warner's best friend and significantly an ex-boyfriend of Cathy's. Schultes' nickname was Harley, the very name written on the refrigerator in blood. He was also a devoted fan of the heavy metal band Metallica, another chilling detail found at the crime scene. Adding to the suspicion, Schultes' distinctive truck had been seen near Cathy's apartment complex that very afternoon. Detective Moni, feeling a surge of grim hope, personally interviewed Schultes. Schultes proved evasive and lacked a solid alibi for the crucial hours of the murder. He admitted that he had written the messages Metallica, Harley was here and I was here on Cathy's inner thigh, but strongly claimed he had done so months earlier at a party using a red marker, which he then wiped off. The story strained belief, especially given the new forensic technology revealing the cleaned-off messages. Convinced they had their man, police arrested Troy Schultes 3 days after the murder. The small city of Three Rivers breathed a collective momentary sigh of relief. However, that relief was short-lived. Once again, forensic evidence delivered a devastating setback. Schultes' fingerprints did not match the hidden print found on the pink phone, and his shoe size was not consistent with the bloody print in the bathroom. After spending 9 tense days in jail, Troy Schultes was released. The main suspect had disappeared, leaving investigators back at square one, struggling with the deep implications. It was like chasing a ghost, Detective Moni confided to a colleague. Every lead seemed to disappear, and the killer just vanished. With no eyewitnesses, no clear motive, and the physical evidence offering tempting clues but no definite suspect, the investigation hit its first major roadblock. Three Rivers, a community that had briefly hoped for swift justice, now struggled with the chilling reality that Cathy Sue Swartz's killer was still out there, walking freely among them. The Swartz family, particularly Audrey and David Sr., held on to each development. Their initial shock slowly hardening into a quiet, aching despair. "We just need answers," Audrey Swartz whispered to a local reporter, her voice raw with grief. During a small impromptu vigil held by concerned neighbors a week after the murder. "Someone knows something. Please, if you have any information, come forward. Don't let our Cathy be forgotten." What neither the grieving Swartz family nor the determined Three Rivers Police Department could have imagined in the winter of 1988 was that justice for Cathy Sue Swartz would take over 35 years to arrive, or that the key to solving the case, an unseen trace of the killer, already lay within the carefully packaged evidence, waiting for science to catch up to a monster who walked freely among them. The initial shock of Cathy's murder gradually hardened into something more harmful within Three Rivers. Fear, and then a weary resignation. Enrollment at the local high school dropped slightly as parents questioned the safety of their small town. The cheerful Christmas decorations that had decorated Cathy's apartment complex suddenly felt out of place, quickly taken down as the festive spirit disappeared. Unlocked doors, once a symbol of trust, were now double-bolted. The whispers of a killer at large created a permanent chill in the community air. For David Sr. and Audrey Augie Swartz, the loss of their daughter was a wound that never healed. The initial raw grief settled into a deep aching absence. Michael Warner, still struggling with his own sorrow, moved out of the apartment soon after, taking Courtney with him. Though he wasn't her biological father, he remained a steadfast presence in Courtney's young life, fulfilling Cathy's unspoken wish for her daughter's stability. Audrey and David Sr., though finding comfort in Courtney, still felt the sharp pain of Cathy's missing presence. Audrey, once known for her easy laughter, often retreated into quiet thinking, her eyes distant. David Sr. found himself unable to focus on the bowling alley's pro shop. The joyous sounds of strikes and spares felt painfully out of place with his inner turmoil. He began attending every city council meeting, listening carefully, always hoping for a whisper of new information. The Cathy Swartz case, officially still open, slowly gathered dust. Detective Mike Money, who carried the permanent memory of that crime scene, remained deeply committed throughout his career. Even as he climbed the ranks to detective sergeant, he made it a personal ritual to pull out Cathy's file every December, spreading the papers across his desk. He would look over every detail, every overlooked witness statement, every inconclusive forensic report. "You never really let them go," he'd tell younger officers who joined the cold case unit years later. "Especially the ones that burn a hole in your soul." Cathy was one of those. It was his quiet way of telling Cathy and her family that she was not forgotten. The physical evidence from Cathy's apartment went on a journey typical of many cold cases. Initially stored in the active case room at the Three Rivers PD, it was later transferred to a less accessible archives basement. The 1988 collection methods, state-of-the-art for their time, were basic by future standards. Fingerprints were lifted with basic powder. Blood and other biological samples were preserved in paper envelopes, not the sterile, climate-controlled containers that would become standard. Documentation relied on handwritten chain of custody forms, sometimes with minor gaps. Despite these limitations, the Three Rivers Police Department, guided by Chief Henderson's strict rules, recognized the unique cruelty of the Swartz case and made sure its evidence was treated with extraordinary care. A young evidence technician, Clara Jenkins, carefully relabeled and organized the boxes during a departmental overhaul in the late 1990s, unaware that her careful work was preserving a future breakthrough. Media coverage of Cathy's murder came and went. The initial flurry of front-page stories and breathless local TV reports slowed down, coming back only around important anniversaries. The 5-year mark in 1993 saw a touching local newspaper article, revisiting the unsolved tragedy, featuring a photo of a somber Audrey Swartz holding a now 5-year-old Courtney. By the 10th anniversary in 1998, Cathy's murder had become a local legend, a chilling tale whispered among high school students, a reminder of the darkness that could hide beneath Three Rivers' quiet appearance. A Three Rivers high school student newspaper article that year, detailing the town's unsolved mystery, mistakenly referred to Cathy's fiancé as her husband. This prompted a quiet but firm letter from David and Audrey Swartz, reminding the young editor, "This is not just a story. This is our daughter's life and our family's ongoing heartbreak." The turn of the millennium brought new hope with the gradual growth of DNA analysis. In 2002, the Three Rivers Police Department, under the leadership of a new chief, authorized the first cold case review of Cathy's murder, sending some of the preserved biological evidence for DNA testing. The technology, still new for such old samples, yielded inconclusive results. A devastating setback that used up valuable material without providing answers. "It was heartbreaking," Chief Roberts stated at a small press conference. "We believed this was our chance, but the science wasn't quite there yet for what we had. But we will not give up. We have preserved what remains for future testing." As the investigation repeatedly stalled and restarted, Three Rivers itself underwent subtle changes. The sprawling cornfields beyond Mendon gave way to new housing developments. The bowling alley where David Sr. worked saw fewer league nights, a shift in local entertainment. Courtney, unaware of the full horror that had made her an orphan, grew up loved and protected by Michael Warner and her grandparents, carrying her mother's bright eyes. Local schools, in a quiet nod to their town's darkest chapter, began including Cathy's case in discussions about community strength and the ongoing pursuit of justice, making sure new generations would remember what longtime residents couldn't forget. Through these decades of change, Cathy's murder subtly influenced local law enforcement. The case became a cautionary tale taught to every new Three Rivers officer, emphasizing the critical importance of proper evidence collection and careful preservation. Before Cathy Swartz, a police academy instructor named Deirdre Calloway would explain in 2010, "We treated evidence like it only needed to last until trial. After Cathy, we began treating evidence like it might need to speak for the victim 30, 40, 50 years later." That fundamental shift in thinking has helped solve dozens of other cases that might otherwise have gone cold. By the 25th anniversary in 2013, the investigation had been officially reviewed multiple times. Fingerprints had been run through automated identification systems, fibers analyzed with increasingly sophisticated microscopes. The 30th anniversary in 2018 marked a somber milestone. What had once been discussed as a tragedy that might be solved someday was increasingly viewed as a cold case that might never find resolution. The Three Rivers Herald newspaper's anniversary coverage that year carried the somber headline, "3 decades later, has justice for Cathy Swartz become impossible?" Audrey Swartz, then in her early 70s, gave what many assumed would be her final public interview about her daughter's case. "I've accepted I may not live to see Cathy's killer brought to justice," she told the reporter, her voice frail but determined. "But I believe that day will come. Science advances. People's consciences trouble them as they age. Secrets become harder to keep. Someone knows something, and someday that knowledge will come to light. What Audrey and David Sr. could not have known was that the breakthrough was already beginning to take shape through a revolutionary approach to DNA analysis that would transform cold case investigations. Worldwide, the early 2010s marked a huge shift in forensic science. In 2012, the FBI launched a significant upgrade to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, expanding the genetic markers used in DNA profiling from 13 to 20. This dramatically increased the system's identification capabilities, making direct matches more robust. The following year, the first successful use of familial DNA searching in a U.S. criminal case showed how investigators could identify suspects not just through direct matches but through their relatives' genetic information, opening entirely new avenues. But the real revolution arrived by 2018, genetic genealogy. This cutting-edge technique, which used commercial DNA databases where users had voluntarily opted to make their information available for law enforcement, matching to identify criminal suspects through distant family connections, emerged as a powerful new tool in cold case investigations. The high-profile arrest of the Golden State Killer that April, solving crimes dating back to the 1970s, sent shockwaves through both the law enforcement community and the public consciousness. A new era of cold case resolution had dawned. In Three Rivers, these developments were watched with particular interest by Police Chief Scott Bowling, a careful leader with a deep respect for the department's history. Bowling had inherited the thick Cathy Swartz case file when he became chief. He knew that despite decades of efforts, a crucial piece of unidentified DNA found among the blood evidence at the original crime scene remained the last best hope. He tasked Detective Sergeant Sam Smallcombe with revisiting the Swartz file with a new mandate. Explore genetic genealogy. Smallcombe, a seasoned investigator known for his determination, had spent years working on cold cases and recognized the potential. The Swartz case has never been about a lack of evidence. Chief Bowling explained in a department memo requesting funding for advanced DNA testing in late 2021. It's been about our inability to connect that evidence to a specific individual. The genetic genealogy techniques that identified the Golden State Killer could be our path to finally bringing Cathy's killer to justice. His request was approved. In early 2022, the Three Rivers Police Department officially partnered with the Michigan State Police to apply forensic genetic genealogy, FGG, to the preserved DNA evidence from Cathy's case. Detective Sergeant Todd Peterson of the Michigan State Police, a specialist in FGG, was assigned to the case. The evidence, including the precious unidentified DNA sample that had survived decades of storage, was carefully packaged for shipment to a specialized laboratory, a private facility at the forefront of this revolutionary science. The process began with extracting usable DNA from the precious samples. Given the 34 years that had passed, the DNA was degraded and fragmented. A huge challenge. We received a microscopic amount of DNA, Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead forensic genetic genealogist at the private lab, later explained. Under normal circumstances, it would have been insufficient. But advances in amplification techniques allowed us to work miracles with this limited material. Using whole genome amplification, the laboratory created enough copies of the DNA fragments to generate a comprehensive profile, focusing on hundreds of thousands of genetic markers, far more than the standard 20 markers used in conventional law enforcement databases. This expanded profile was then compared against public genetic databases where users had voluntarily opted to make their information available for law enforcement matching. The initial comparisons yielded no direct matches, but a series of astonishing connections began to emerge. The database identified 17 individuals who shared enough genetic markers with the crime scene DNA to be distant relatives of the killer. These weren't close relatives like siblings or children, Dr. Thorne clarified. They were primarily third and fourth cousins, people who likely had never met the perpetrator, but shared great-great-grandparents or even earlier common ancestors. From these distant connections, the genetic genealogy team In collaboration with Detective Sergeant Sam Smallcombe and MSP's Todd Peterson, began the painstaking process of building family trees. Working backward through historical records, they identified common ancestors among the matching individuals, then worked forward through countless birth, marriage, and death certificates to construct a comprehensive family structure spanning multiple generations. It's like solving a massive multi-generational puzzle where you don't know what the final picture looks like, Detective Smallcombe observed, looking over complex charts. You're just trying to find the missing piece, knowing it's there somewhere within this vast family. By late 2022, after months of dedicated genealogical work, the team had constructed family trees containing over 2,400 individuals across 7 generations. They then began narrowing the field by applying filters based on what was known about the killer. Male, likely between 18 to 40 years old in 1988, and with some connection to Three Rivers or Southwest Michigan. This careful filtering process gradually reduced the pool of interest to 38 potential suspects. Further refinement based on geographical location during the time of the murder and other known facts finally narrowed the list to just 7 men who were in the right place at the right time with the right genetic connections. Detective Sergeant Sam Smallcombe received the shortlist on January 15, 2023. When he opened that email, he expected to see a list of names he'd never encountered before. Instead, his blood ran cold as he stared at the top name, realizing a deep, chilling truth that had eluded them for over 3 decades: Robert Odell Waters. The name didn't immediately jump out as a prior suspect, but the genealogical link was undeniable. At 53 years old, Waters now lived in Beaufort, South Carolina, far from the quiet Michigan town that had haunted Money's career for so long. Smallcombe immediately brought the name to Chief Scott Bowling and Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant Todd Peterson. A quick review of the Three Rivers case files for anyone named Waters yielded no direct hit as a primary suspect from 1988. Waters had been 18 years old at the time of Cathy's murder. He had lived in Three Rivers briefly, working odd jobs, but had moved away quietly a few months after the crime, dissolving into the anonymity of a wandering young adult. He was never interviewed in the original investigation, too far outside the circles of Cathy's known acquaintances. Yet the genetic connection was now undeniable. He was a ghost in our files, Chief Bowling would later say, someone who slipped through the cracks of 1988 investigation methods because he wasn't who we were looking for. But the DNA knew. To confirm the genetic connection, investigators needed a direct DNA sample from Robert Waters. Rather than approaching him directly and risking an alert, the team opted for a covert collection, a standard technique in genetic genealogy cases. Surveillance teams were sent to Beaufort, South Carolina. After several days, the opportunity arose when Waters threw away a coffee cup outside a local convenience store. The cup was swiftly retrieved by an undercover officer and rushed to the state crime laboratory. The results, confirming the match, came back with astonishing speed. The DNA from Waters' coffee cup matched the unidentified DNA sample from Cathy Swartz's crime scene, with a probability that eliminated all others. After 35 years, Cathy Sue Swartz's killer had a name. I remember staring at the report, just absolutely silent. Detective Smallcombe later recounted, the gravity of the moment still real. Elation because we finally had our answer. Horror because of the decades of silence and the life this man had lived. The horror came not just from solving the case, but from the realization that Robert Waters had simply moved on, building a seemingly ordinary life far from Michigan. He had spent decades living without consequence while Cathy's family endured a lifetime of unanswered questions. With the DNA match confirmed, Chief Bowling, Detective Smallcombe, and MSP Detective Sergeant Peterson coordinated Waters' arrest. The operation needed to be handled carefully, not only due to the shockwaves it would send through Three Rivers, but also the delicate nature of a 35-year-old cold case finally reaching its conclusion. On April 30, 2023, Robert Odell Waters, then 53 years old, was arrested without incident at his home in Beaufort, South Carolina, on charges related to Cathy Sue Swartz's murder. News of the arrest traveled like wildfire through Three Rivers. Local news outlets broke the story, many struggling to reconcile the quiet, often overlooked figure from the distant past with the brutal killer now revealed. Former high school acquaintances or Three Rivers residents from 1988 Some of whom remembered a withdrawn young man, expressed a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. For the Swartz family, the news brought a complex, bittersweet wave of emotions. Audrey Swartz, now 74, received the news personally from Chief Scott Bowling and Detective Sam Smallcombe. She clutched her husband David Sr.'s hand, her eyes welling with tears that had been held back for decades. "I knew this day would come," she whispered, her voice a mix of deep relief and renewed sorrow. A lifetime of unanswered prayers finally acknowledged. David Sr., his frame bent by years of quiet grief, could only nod. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. Michael Warner, who had lovingly raised Courtney, felt a surge of validation and anger. A justice sought for the young woman he had planned to spend his life with. Courtney Swartz, now a woman in her mid-30s, learned the identity of the man who had stolen her mother, a painful answer to a question that had silently shaped her entire life. However, the legal resolution that everyone expected would never fully happen. Robert Odell Waters never stood trial in Michigan. Just a few days after his arrest on May 4, 2023, he was found dead in his cell at the Beaufort County Jail in South Carolina. Investigators, including MSP Detective Sergeant Todd Peterson, quickly confirmed the cause of death was suicide. The news of Robert Waters' suicide echoed through the Swartz family like a cruel final twist. It was a victory, undeniably, to know the monster had been named, but a hollow one. The courtroom confrontation, the confession, the public reckoning they had yearned for over decades all evaporated. There would be no testimony of remorse, no forced accounting for the savagery, just a sudden final silence leaving an entirely different kind of wound. The injustice of never truly facing him, of never truly understanding why the killer had taken his own life, denying Cathy's family the closure of a courtroom trial, a confession, or a direct reckoning with their decades-long pain. Chief Scott Bowling held a press conference in Three Rivers, his voice somber as he announced Waters' death. While this is not the resolution we hoped for in terms of a trial, the scientific evidence definitively identified Robert Odell Waters as Cathy Sue Swartz's killer, he stated, looking directly into the cameras. "After 35 years, we can finally tell the Swartz family who took their daughter from them." Detective Mike Money, now a veteran detective sergeant just months from retirement, stood by the chief's side. His eyes reflected the deep satisfaction of a case finally closed, mixed with the lasting ache of what might have been. He had carried Cathy's file and her ghost in his heart for 35 years. The name was known, the monster identified, but the full measure of justice in its human form had slipped away once more. "Cathy's case became part of my soul," Money said to a local reporter afterward. "To finally put a name to the monster, it's a weight lifted, but the tragedy remains. Thanks for being here and listening. Don't forget to hit the bell for our latest stories. Stay safe and take care with your loved ones."